Good morning, and thank you for tuning in for Live from the Studio with Eric Dever. While the museum is closed, Eric and several other artists in the museum collection have generously donated their time to lead workshops from their studios. I want to just take a moment to thank the artists. It was a great series, and videos of these workshops have been posted or will be posted on the Parrish website, so you can revisit them until we can return to workshops at the museum. Eric Dever leads the popular open studios on Saturdays, and he's bringing a very popular topic from that series to you, collage and assemblage. And before I turn it over to Eric, I just want to mention about the format. He's going to present for about 30 minutes. And during that time, if you have questions, you can put them into the Q&A. And toward the end of the talk, I'll prompt you to think about sharing your questions, and then we'll bring them to Eric following his presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to Eric now. Eric, you there?
Yeah. Yes. Hi. Well, welcome. And thank you for tuning into our Zoom workshop today. We're going to begin with a brief discussion about Louise Nevelson and Alfonso Ossorio, both in the Parrish Permanent Collection. Perhaps we could see the image of Louise's untitled assemblage. There we go. All right. Well, this is an untitled work from the late 1970s by Louise Nevelson in the Parrish Permanent Collection. It's a black monochrome assemblage which reveals both highlights and shadows, and is much more concentrated and alive than left unpainted. Louise Nevelson's father and her grandfather were in the timber business. In 1902, her father decided to start a new life in the United States. He went into the lumber business in Rockland, Maine. A feeling for wood had been bred into her, and by the time she was 6, she was already working with small pieces of wood that she had scavenged from her father's lumber yard. In her autobiographical book, Dawns and Dusks, Nevelson relates how a librarian in Rockland asked her what she would be when she grew up, and she replied, "I'm going to be an artist, a sculptor. I don't want color to help me." Nevelson sprayed much of her work with black paint. Note, well, we did have but in any case, for the most part, they were all black. Sometimes they were always monochromatic. Sometimes there might be a white piece, and I believe a metallic or gold one as well. Nevelson spoke about herself. "I guess I'm just sort of a one-man circus. I call myself an architect of shadow and reflection." I'd like to point out, if we could go back to the screen again, please. I'd like to point out a brochure image. Oh, great. Louise Nevelson actually has, some of you may know it, but at St. Peter's Church, 619 Lexington Avenue at 54th Street in Manhattan, is the Louise Nevelson Chapel. And during this time of lockdown, I think this place may open in advance of museums. And so if you're in the city, please consider making a visit, but calling ahead. If we could move to the next slide with Ossorio and Nevelson, please. Great, perfect. Nevelson was also friends with Alfonso Ossorio, and we'll be speaking about his work today and demonstrating some of his techniques or interests. Helen Harrison, art historian and director of the Paula Krasner House and Study Center, recounts Nevelson's gift of a wooden shoe tree to Ossorio, suggesting it was much better suited combined with the other anthropomorphic forms and aspects of his work, which included glass eyes. Let's make a footnote about that. In 1958, he began experimenting with adding materials like buttons, fake gems, ropes, and mirrors to his oil paintings. Gail Levin, Lee Krasner's biographer, wrote about Krasner's influence on Ossorio's Congregation series, inspired by her mosaic, round tabletop collage. I'd like to show you the picture in this book, if I may. Here we go. This is the biography, and here is the picture of Lee Krasner's mosaic table. Lee Krasner and Ossorio and his partner Ted Dragon were close friends, and also with Jackson Pollock as well. But apparently this was something that Ossorio was really taken by, and we see her influence in his work. Okay, so we're going to get started now, and we're going to be working with the following adhesives, any combination of or individually. Spackle, this is regular household spackle. This is another material. This is adhesive and grout. It's for setting tile. Both of these can be found at any hardware store. I happen to just find this in my closet. And also Elmer's glue, or any household glue is just fine, because we're working with cardboard and it's going to be upright. I'm going to use with the spackle. Now, for wood samples, you can really use anything. We're looking really at Louise's interest now, but this is a bag of scraps here, of scrap wood, and these are rather flat pieces, and that's what I've been working with on this collage, more flat shapes. Some of them, interestingly, are biscuits that's used in woodworking to join pieces of wood, and some dowels that are also used to join wood too. But in this work here, it's a rather random pattern that I've established, and so I'll demonstrate this. There's really no rhythm or rhyme to it. Louise Nevelson's work is much more organized. There's usually a real vertical lift in all of her work. But in any case, you could use a spackle knife. Or you could also use a butter knife from your kitchen. Again, I like that angle in the work, in the support, that allows us to have some more flexibility. But anyway, take a big scoop of this and apply it rather thick, because this is going to be your adhesive. I wouldn't worry about being too careful, because sometimes how the spackle comes up between the objects becomes part of the piece and is quite nice. And so here's a couple of shapes. Let's try this here. So, and you just press it in, really, and it will stay. If it doesn't fall down. Okay, so here we go. Here we go again. Look, it's still staying. And here's another form here. And you pretty much can just work and fill it up. And you can compose something. If you're not interested, if you want to work representationally, you might think about making some sort of a picture. If you are just interested in the material, which is largely what I am, I just apply these fairly randomly, and I get a pretty consistent result. And we'll put one more. Okay. Well, I'm going to move through a number of steps here, so to show you really the whole process. So this is working with wood again, in sympathy with Louise Nevelson, and here we're going to work with an Ossorio type project, and we'll use again the spackle. And can you see this all right? Okay, so we're applying it across here. And keep it pretty thick. This will ensure that the pieces will remain. Again, you could really use anything. Ossorio's work, as I mentioned, I don't want to focus too much on this, but it included glass eyes. And I found this rather amusing, but in the in the Parrish materials, they have these little plastic kind of eyeballs, and I don't know if that was the purpose. I tend to think it was. It was out of respect to Ossorio's interest. So here we can put that in there. Now, mind you, buttons work really well because they have these two holes in them, and when you apply it, it allows the spackle medium or the grout to come through, and it gives you extra hold. Also, he worked also with shells and glass, so we have that to include in there. I found some puzzle pieces in the mixture of collage elements from the workshop, and I thought these were particularly apropos for people in these lockdown situations who may have become frustrated with these puzzles or didn't finish them or are interested in another life for them. I suggest taking them and putting them into your Ossorio collage randomly and coming up with something altogether different. And they're nice to work with because the spaces in between, or the negative space, really sticks into this spackle material really well. Okay, now we also have, okay, let's put another shell in there. Okay, here we go, another shell. I haven't been too concerned about composition here. I just really like the material, but you'll find that a certain rhythm will start to occur through repetition of the materials that you select. And even as chaotic as this one, there is some order to it. Now, here we also have some beads. These are very popular to work with. We can just stick them in here like that. These are colored beads. And as I mentioned before, you could probably come up with a real composition, but then again, just working materially is a nice way to go. And that's a rather non-objective project, but you do end up with something that ultimately has to do with self-expression. Sometimes when we start out on a project with no particular direction, we end up really with something much more personal. Okay, so here's the last bead. I'm not quite sure what that looks like. Okay, so now we're going to go to the next step here, and this is pretty important to having a complete project. I'm not going to put any paint on this one. I thought about it. Sometimes Ossorio often would paint into the work. You could use a brush. You could use a squirt bottle. He was very acquainted with that. And you could also spray as well, but we're going to save that for something else. Okay, so let's put this one aside. This is a piece that I started a little earlier to use as an example. But note, here, let me hold this up here close. You could, the painted area versus the unpainted area really comes alive. It really illustrates what Louise Nevelson was talking about, how these seemingly random elements, once mounted and painted, seem much more concentrated, and you really do see a lot of light and shadow and reflection. This is black acrylic paint, which I've mixed up, and I'm going to use a brush, and we'll finish it off right now, so you'll have a sense of what one can do. This is kind of her signature black. I'm using acrylic. She used enamel spray. We don't use those anymore because of the aerosol aspect, so I have some alternatives for us. But it's just black paint, a brush, really easy. Probably could do a workaround and even use shoe polish too. But in any case, it's really simple. It's just a matter of really flooding the work and to get into the all of the spaces, since it's rather relief. Okay, but still this one's a little bit flat too. It's not as relief as really Louise's work, but proportionately, I believe it might be. So let's finish. Let's keep going, and really flood your brush with paint. It will make a big difference. It'll make your work easy. If you need to, you can always go back in and touch it up with a small brush to get some of these hard to reach areas. Okay, so keep going. Another possibility is to paint it sloppily, and so that you don't fill the whole work, and you'll end up with areas that have a little bit more contrast. And so it would be a rather different work. Okay. Okay, so for our purposes here today, let me take a look. I think that's complete enough. I don't. There still are some areas where you can see the spackle underneath, but on your work you could have a more complete finish. Well, I'm going to bring up another one now, and this is another alternative. In this work, we're using more dimensional pieces here. Let me show you. These look like they're cubes. These look like they're from children's wooden toys, some wheel type things. There's like an egg shape. These are all wood. And I glued these two, and I've used that spackle material again. And I've glued these to a sheet of cardboard. Now, one of the ways that this would be very difficult to paint, and I'll show you why. It's because it is so relief. It is almost like a city on a piece of wood. So I think the way to handle this is for us to use a spray. Now, we talked about this before. The color that, we're not going to use black today, we're going to use, I've mixed up vermilion and this neon red. And I think this color has nothing to do with Louise Nevelson, but I think it's evocative of 20th century modern outdoor sculpture. I feel really, I gravitate towards this color. I've mixed it up in a repurposed household spray bottle, and we all have these things. I would say you want this to be about the consistency of milk. So it's just adding some water to this paint and mix it to the consistency of milk. You don't want it to be too thick because it'll clog the nozzle. Also keep in mind that you may need to make multiple applications and let it dry a little bit between applications. And this is acrylic paint. You probably could do it with oil paint as well, but I strongly suggest using acrylic just because it dries much faster, and you won't be aerosolizing turpentine or mineral spirits. This is just water. Okay, so let's begin with this. This is actually really fun, and it goes pretty quickly too. You can see that the color is already, the work is already turning that warm vermilion red. And the great thing about it is you can get into all of these small cracks. And again, it comes, oh, we lost something there. Again, it comes alive with the paint, and I think it's because of sheen as well and some reflection. Okay, so I've oversaturated this; it's dripping, and but that's not really important. You can stop at this point and probably turn it around to make sure that you got the other side, or other direction rather. And we did lose a piece there. It's not ideal to work with this upright. You'll be working flat, most likely. And you can also use glue for your adhesive, which is actually much more permanent. So keep that in mind. And anyway, so there we go with that. How does, here, we need a little more here. Okay, I'm gonna pull it up closer to you as well. Okay. Now, keep in mind, we've been working rather directly with Nevelson and Ossorio's examples here, but you don't have to do that. It's possible that to come up with your own scheme, or something maybe that's a hybrid sort of work. And in the Parrish studio, we do experiment with these projects, and this is a rather smallish one, but this one is monochromatic, but you could see a little bit of the beads coming through. It's painted over like the Nevelson sculpture, but there are elements of Ossorio in here. Another example is this one here, which is acrylic paint on top of black tar. And this area here, these are those colored beads also, but instead of carefully placing them, we took just a handful of them and mashed them into the wet material, as well as the same above with some sand, with colored sand. Okay, and then this down here is just yellow paint squirted on to the bottom of the surface. And so in ways, this is a much more expressionistic or action type of painting. And it involves both of the working techniques of both artists. And there's another way that we can do this as well too. And this one is also working with the spackle, but instead of covering it up, we took a tool and we made lines in there. And then we rubbed in black paint as well, and we also used a squirt bottle to use thick black paint to create some heavy lines in here, and work back in some colored sand again, and then some more acrylic color, and so it has the quality of a still life as well. So you can, there's a lot you can do with this. It's really what you like to do. It's not necessary to work monochromatically exclusively, but it's a nice exercise to experience.
Eric, can you hear me?
Yes.
I just want to mention it's
Yes.
about 11:25, just so you know the time. And I also want to prompt our attendees to start to put any questions or comments you might have into the chat.
Oh, great. Perfect. Well, this would be a good time for that. Thank you.
Let's see. All right. We just have one, I guess, a material suggestion that Tinker Toys could be used as the wood pieces.
That's right. I believe that some of these round pieces with holes seem to be reminiscent of that. That's true.
And I did put those googly eyes in there on purpose when I was pulling those materials together for you. Yeah, because those are very present in Ossorio's work, the
Well,
eyeballs.
yes, I appreciated that.
Okay, we have a few questions coming in about materials. So one is, did you use the tile adhesive, or did you just?
No, I used the tile adhesive on the Ossorio work here, and the reason I did is that it seems to be here. Let's take this down. It works better if you're using plastics or non-porous materials, which include ceramics. I think it probably works better with shells too, buds. But there's a great deal of plastic in this work, and so yes, and there is actually some real tile in here too. So I would recommend using this adhesive and grouch material. It's easy to work with, easy to clean up, and you can buy it really anywhere. We used the spackle material with the wood. It seemed more suitable. Probably the best material to use with the wood is going to be glue, and you'll be working flat, so that won't be an issue.
So another question is, can you add glue to the spackle to improve the adhesion of the spackle?
I don't see why not. You could do that, but you could just skip the spackle altogether and just go straight to glue. The benefit of working with the glue, it might be easier to paint. But then again, spackle is fairly paintable too. You have to experiment a little with these things.
Okay, and someone asked about at the time, I think you had the still life piece on the screen. Just asked what that was, what, if you could say a little more about that.
Oh, sure. Well, in the Parrish workshop, we also have another material that we work with that we didn't bring in today. And, you can use black paint, thick black acrylic paint, and achieve this as well. But this is like a household tar material. In the 60s, a lot of artists were working with tar, real tar, and it was messy. But we have these vinyl insulation products that handle like tar, but they come in containers, and you can create a line with it, or you could smooth them as well. I was trying to respond a little bit. I was taking my cues here from some of the Cubist work of George Braque and Picasso, and artists from that period who were working with mixed media. They were adding a lot of everyday common household materials into their work, including coffee grounds and eggshells. Because we have an abundance of sand on Eastern Long Island, I used some sand instead. And then this is colored sand and acrylic as well.
And somebody asked about the support. It's
yes. This support, this is ideal. It's masonite, this one. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty, I'd say it's about a 1/4 inch masonite. Masonite comes in different thicknesses and grades. This is about 1/4 inch. You can cut it reasonably with a metal ruler and a safety knife. Be very careful. The other supports we've been, this is a thinner masonite, okay? This for this piece here. This one is thinner, but it works as well. It seems to maybe bend a little more. And for the other works, you've been using corrugated cardboard for the support as well. And it seems to work well. If the work, this sheet is about 11 by 8.5, regular size sheet of paper. It works pretty well. It's not really buckled too much. If you get much larger though, I think you need to think about using masonite, or you could also use canvas board or cut plywood. That would work as well too.
And we had a couple questions about the tar product. That was a driveway repair product that we got at Herrick Hardware.
Oh, great.
I don't remember the name of it. Do you remember the name of it, Eric, by any chance? That's something we worked with in the studio.
I don't, but I think, yeah, I would just ask for driveway repair material.
Yeah, and it was, it's not technically tar. It was like an acrylic product, more like more like tile. What is that stuff you put along the bathtub that's flexible?
Oh, yeah, caulking.
Caulking, exactly. It was more like a caulking type product, which is why we chose that versus like the big vat of driveway tar. I hope that helps. There are quite a few questions about that.
It's also used as a roofing material as well. It comes, sometimes you can get it in just a plastic type tubing, which you just cut the end and squirt, or you need to have one of those delivery guns that's metal, and you put the canister, which is like this, and then you pull a trigger and it advances a sort of a plunger to push the material out. But I think you could look under roofing material as well. And any hardware store will carry that.
Yeah, and they tend to be really helpful in the hardware stores. I always go and ask it, we're going to use this for an art product or we're going to use it in the studio. And that was what they recommended. And it didn't have any fumes from what I can remember. I don't remember it being bothersome at all.
We were indoors using it. I think it seemed like a latex material.
Yeah, that was why we picked it.
Yeah, seemed
all
fine.
Right, one other question. I don't know if you ever use this, but can you use Mod Podge?
Sure, you can. I think it's better probably for the, let me find the example here. That will probably be better for the flatter kinds of material. You see, there's not much relief in this. So yes, you could certainly do that. But I kind of like the material aspect of the spackle, though I like seeing it. But that would certainly work. Okay,
and one more. Okay, someone mentioned that Mod Podge works well, especially with paper and buttons, so the flat materials. Okay. And then there's one more question. Oh, about the masonite versus the cardboard. Does the masonite, first, do you have to prepare the masonite to paint on it or to do this on it? Not for paint either?
Not this project. You could, if you wanted to have, if you were going to be making a white monochromatic work, or frankly, for that matter, anything, if you're going to make a black one, you might consider painting the background first black, because that way you won't have to go later and fill in all of these cracks, because this is the white material coming through. And if you're using glue, you could do that, but no, that works.
All right, and here's an art history question. Do you see this in relationship to works by Picasso and Braque that use things like eggshells and coffee grounds? Very much.
This in particular, I do, and it's because of really, it's another kind of abstraction, and it's of course it involves representation, but they found particular freedom working with material, and it helped to advance their interest in abstraction as well.
All right, and just one more question about materials. Does the archival quality of the cardboard bother you? Is that a concern?
Well, it is. We're using it really for expediency here today. If this is part of what you really do as an artist, or if you're concerned about that, you might consider working perhaps with cradled plywood, or some type of wood that's cradled that has a frame on the back that prevents it from warping. Masonite is not archivally is not an ideal material either. The old forms of it used to have formaldehyde, and they would disintegrate at a certain point. But I will say this, if you're working with acrylic and you've got enough acrylic medium on the cardboard, the acrylic is gonna last, and it will probably preserve the cardboard as well. It might degrade somewhat on the back, but the acrylic is essentially plastic material. And I believe these adhesives probably the grout one might last longer. I'd say glue though, wherever you can, glue is a good way to go. You might even think about epoxy too. Now that does smell. There's a fume aspect with it. If you're working with a lot of plastic and ceramic, it might be better than the wood putty.
So I think that about wraps up the questions, unless anybody has any last ones. Eric, this was great.
Oh, thank you.
I'm going to share at the end. We have a place on Instagram where we'd love for any participants who make something inspired by this class to share. It's hashtag Parrish Home Art Studios. I'll put that up for everybody at the end. There's also a link to Eric's website on that page. So you can learn more about his work and connect with Eric. Unless there's any final questions. Until we can be together in the studio again, Eric, thanks for the inspiration.
Oh, thanks, Carol.
We have a couple of nice thank yous coming through. Mm-hmm. All right, great. I'm going to put that last image up. All right, great. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and thank you, Eric.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in.